Okay, we're on Daf Zion Amid Bays in
All right,
a
I'm
little
going on
slightly
mute.
half. So let's get started. We're up to the words the Kula Alma. According to everybody, Mia mi kara beinin levarchi. That before you do the mitzvah, you first have to make the bracha. Mi nolan. How do I know this? The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel kol mitzvahs, all commandments. Mevarach aleim oivel asiyosin. You make the blessing before you do it. The only question is that in this formulation, he uses the word oiver lasiyosin before you do it, as opposed to the famous word koidem lasiyosin, kadima, which means always before. And the reason for that is that the word oiver means immediately after you make the bracha, that's when you should do the mitzvah. No break in between. So now the Gemara asks the question, my mashma daha oiver lishma da kadmuna here. How do I know that the word oiver means kadima, before? So Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Gamakra Vayiritz Achimatz Derech Hakika Vayaber Es Hakushi, and Achimatz ran to the Achiva Vayaber, and he went in front of the Kushi. This was the case where unfortunately Avshalom had rebelled against his father David HaMelech, and they were coming to give the report that Avshalom had gotten killed. Abayir Amamechacha, this week's parsha. Who Oivel Lefaneyem. That means Yaakov Avinu went in front of his entire family when they approached Esau. This is this week's parsha. The Iba is Sema. Okay, I hope you guys can see me because I'm on my phone today. The Iba is Sema Mehacha. Vayaber Malcolm Lefaneyem, and the king went in front. Went before. Hashem Birosheim, and Hashem is at the head of them. This is talking about B'Yemais HaMashiach in the days of the Messiah. Now, Bei Rav Amri, that this rule that we make the bracha before we do the mitzvah has two exceptions to the rule. Chutz minat tefillah, from immersing in the mikvah, and the shofar, and the blowing of shofar. So the Gemara says, Bishleim of tefillah, that makes a lot of sense by tefillah, that obviously we can't make the bracha before we immerse the akati gabra loichaji, because the person is obviously not appropriate, he's not dressed, so you can't make a blessing when you're not dressed. Ella shofar my tama. What do you mean by shofar? That you did that the formulation of making a bracha before you do the mitzvah doesn't apply. If you're going to say the reason is because we're afraid that the tekiyas aren't going to work. You know what happens. Sometimes people try to blow the shofar and it just doesn't work. If that's the case, then you got to stop worrying everywhere. Even by slaughtering umilo, by circumcision, nami, because sometimes the shechita doesn't go. Sometimes, unfortunately, there are problems with the milo, so that doesn't work. You go on the assumption that it's gonna work. El Amar Rav Chisda, you're right. Take out the word shofar. Even shofar, obviously, you make the blessing before we do the mitzvah. Before we do the mitzvah, chutz minat tefillah. We just bilvarit ma. We're just talking about except for immersing in the mikvah. That's the one exception. Tani nami hachi tobal. First you immerse. Va'Allah, then you come out of the water. Ubi alaisayo. When you're out of the water and dressed, Ama baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvayso b'tzivanu al hatfilah. The blessing on the what he called on the doing of the tefillah, which we said before. The word al connotates both the past and the future. In this case, by tefillah, it would connotate the past. Now, the Gemara continues. Now, here the Gemara is going to be very esoteric and it's going to be very repetitive. So we're only going to do explanation on the first thing, and then after that, we're just going to motor through. We said that when we do the Vidika, when we search for the leavened bread with the 10 pieces on the night of the 14th, we do it by the light of a candle. A candle means a one-wick candle. How do I know about this? This is how we learn it. Mitzia, from the searching, from finding, which we mentioned regarding chametz, from another place where we mentioned the word finding. Umitzia michifuf, and finding from searching, which we'll see in another pasuk. V'chifuf michifuf, and searching from again a comparison of two psukim. V'chifuf mineris, and searching to candles. V'neris miner, and candles from there. So what does this all mean? Okay, Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
Mitzia, finding from finding, Siv Hacha, in our case, Shivas Yamim Solo, you must be Techem. 7 days you shall not find leavened bread in your house. So this is already says you shall not find in your house. The Ksiv Hosam, and it says over there in the story where Yosef, where the brothers left Yosef at Tzaddik, and Yosef hid the golden goblet in Binyamin, in Benjamin's backpack, and then he sent the soldiers after them to grab it. So the soldiers came, Vayachpesh, and they searched. Begodol Hachel, they started with the oldest, Ubikot and Kila, and they ended with the youngest, Vayimsa, and they found. So says the Gemara, you see in this pasuk, they searched, Vayachpesh, and they found, which in the Gemara parlance throughout shots, if you search, you shall find. The chifuf mineris, and searching from candles, the ksev. And in that time, Hashem says, I will search Jerusalem with a candle. The neres miner, and candles from candle, the ksev. Ner Hashem nishmas adam. The candle of Hashem is the soul of a man. He searches all the chambers of his insides. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael. How does this apply to B'dikas Chametz? And this is where the Gemara starts getting repetitive, and we're going to speed through. Leile Yudalit, on the night of the 14th, we search for the Chametz by the light of the candle. Even though we don't have an exact proof, we have an allusion to a proof. In other words, the allusion is going to come from the very different psukim from Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim, from the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. Shnema, Shibes Yomim Solo Yamotze. 7 days, leavened bread you shall not find. And he searched, but starting with the oldest. And he stopped with the youngest. And on that day, Hashem says, I will search Jerusalem with a candle. And it says, Ner Hashem and the candle of Hashem is the soul of a person that will be searched. My boy, what do I need the last 2 psukim? If the first pasuk says on that day Hashem will search Yerushalayim with a candle, therefore a candle must be good. If Hashem uses a candle, it must be good. So why do I need the second pasuk to tell me that the candle of Hashem is the soul of a person? We already know that a candle by Hashem is the way to search. The truth of the matter is what was happening in Yerushalayim was a big leniency. Because the merciful one was saying, I will not search Jerusalem by a torch that gives off a lot of illumination, only by the light of a candle. The Zutra Nora, whose light is very little to fade. Why? The Avon Rabba Mishkacha, because the big Averis with the candle I'll find. The Avon Zutra Loi Mishkachas. But the small Averis I won't find with the candle, so this way there won't be so many Averis that I've got to find when the time comes. Tashma, therefore I might think a candle reality is not a good thing to search with, because the whole reason why Hashem searched with a candle was not to find all our Averis. Tashma ner Hashem nishma sadam. The candle of Hashem is the soul of a person, so that a candle is good. Very esoteric. And we're going to have a repeat of this Gemara one more time. We're going to fly through. Tana Rabbana, Ein Boitkin. We do not search. Loila Ora Chama, by the light of the sun. This means if you end up searching before the night of the 14th, or for some reason you couldn't search on the night of the 14th, so you're searching in the morning of the 14th. Veloila or halabana, or not by the light of the moon. Veloila or avuka, and not by the light of a torch. Elala or aner, except with the light of, we do it by the light of a candle. We are now on top of Chesamid Aleph, with 1 daf off. We'll talk about this when we finish the shir. Because the or of the ner is good for searching. Now we have a complete repeat of the Gemara we just did before. Shenema, Shibes Yomim Sa'ar Lo Yamatze, V'Batechem, V'Oime V'Yachvetz V'Godol Achel, V'Oime V'Ezli Echvetz Shleim B'Neiros, V'Oime Ner Hashem Nishmat Sodom Chayvetz Kol Chadu Yiboten. So now the Gemara says, Hi Orachama, this light of the sun Hey Chidami, what's the story? If we're talking about searching the courtyard outside of your house, right? So you're either doing it either the morning after the 14th, or you're doing it the day before. Rabba says courtyard does not have to be searched. Why? Because the ravens are found there, the birds are found there, and we have an assumption where there are birds that means any chametz left over, they're going to eat them. So once you have an assumption that they're going to eat them, I don't got to search it. So what are we talking about? What are we searching by the light of a sun? Elabach Sadra, by a gazebo, a pavilion, which is covered on top but open on all sides. Ha'amar Rabba said, Rabba said that a pavilion, a gazebo that's open on all sides could be searched by the light of the sun. So therefore, what are we saying that when we say that it cannot be searched by the light of the sun? We're talking about a skylight in the house, like we have in our houses over here in Boca Grove, those are in Boca Grove, right? That they all have little skylights, are usually in the kitchen. Right, the Gemara. So what's the problem with that? The what's the problem? If the sun is coming through the skylight, that's no different than a gazebo. Just like by a gazebo, it should work. Why shouldn't it work by a skylight? So the Gemara is saying because the skylight, the sun always comes straight down. It doesn't spread out. So it's saying it's true. Where the sun comes straight down in your kitchen, so right underneath that you could search by the light of the sun. But on the sides, you need to use a candle. So, the Gemara now, but a torch, no. Now, what's a torch? A torch is like the candle that we use for Abdullah, something that has more than one wick. And it's something that has more than one wick. 2 or 3 wicks is the definition of a torch. Why does it say and the glow of the future world will be for the tzaddik and for the righteous, like the light on the first day of the days of creation, the great light that Hashem created on the first day, which He then hid. And the rays of light will come from Hashem's hands to the righteous man, and there will be hidden strength will be revealed. What will the righteous resemble in front of, when in comparison to the Shekhinah, when they're standing in front of the Shekhinah? Like a candle in the presence of a torch. Their light will be so much smaller than the light, obviously, of the Shekhinah. Like I just said before, that the torch of Havdalah is the choicest way of doing the mitzvah of burning the Yorei Oesh. Because on Motzei Shabbos, as the Medrash explains, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the secret of fire. That Hashem Yisparach gave us the secret of fire on Motzei Shabbos, and so we are thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that wonderful gift. Compare and contrast that to the story of Prometheus, the Greek story where the gods wanted to keep the secret of the fire, and he got all burned up and he got punished for having shared it. In our case, they stole that story, of course, and in our case, this is a Rabbi Sachs, who points out the beauty of it, that over here we say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the great giving God who's looking to share everything with us. And on Motzei Shabbos, we thank Him for the sharing of fire. So the question then is, if a torch is so good, why are we not using a torch? Why aren't we using a candle that has more than one wick, a much larger candle than the simple one wick candle to search for the chametz? Because the small candle can search in corners and in cracks, in the holes and the cracks. And obviously a larger flame cannot search as well in holes and in cracks. A candle which only has one wick, you put in front of you and search. But this one, the torch, has to go behind you because its light is so illuminating. If you put it in front of you, you get blinded. Or, as Isaac was kind enough to tell me, when you're on Zoom, make sure that your lighting is not the lighting is not in such a place where it blinds everybody else that's looking at it, right? And with the torch, one is afraid that he's going to set the whole house on fire. But with a small candle, he's not so afraid. Rabbeinu Amar, Hai Moshach Noira. The light of a candle is steady. Bahai Miktab I Kutufe. But the light of a torch, of a Havdalah candle, flickers. If you ever watch, when you light the Havdalah candle, it dances, right? But the candle which only one with only one wick is steady. Zakti Gemara. The Mishnah said as follows: any place where chametz is not brought into does not require searching. So the Gemara asks, what's the word kol? Kol makim lasuimai. All places don't have the. It should have just simply said makim, a place she'ei machnisim. So every time a Mishnah uses the word kol, it's coming to add something that I might not have known on my own. So Zakti Gemara le'suya the Tanu Rabbanan. It's coming to add what the Rabbanim taught in the following Baraisa. A hole in a wall that was either very high on the wall or very low on the wall. The gag hayotzia, or the roof of an attic annex, which obviously is very difficult. It's not a place that's conducive to putting things into. The gag hamigdol, or the top of a tower-shaped closet. The point being, again, it's a big schlep, and it's not logical that you would have put chametz there. The refes bakar, and a candle, and a cattle barn, a barn where in other words, where the animal would have eaten up the chametz, the lulin, and a chicken coop where, again, if you had chametz in there, they would have eaten it up. Or matzbein, or a storehouse of straw, or a storehouse of wine and oils, ain't tzarich bedika, because none of these places are places that are normal for putting in chametz. Is a bed that serves as a partition in the house. So again, obviously in one-room houses, the way it was, they used different pieces of furniture to create partitions, and which leaves a gap, which means that it's not a futon. It's not a futon bed. It's a bed like we have with legs on it, so that there are things that can obviously go underneath the bed. Sarich bedika, needs searching. There are a minute when we ask that there's another Bryce that seems to contradict the other. If there's a hole between two apartments, between Ruvain and Shimon's apartment, Ruvain searches on his side as far as his hand goes. And he searches from the other side as far as his hand goes. And the remainder, you go ahead and you nullify in your heart, the part where you can't reach from either side. It's a bed that serves as a partition in the house. The eights of Abonim Sedurim Tachtel, and underneath we have wood and stones are arranged, so it's used as a storage place. Underneath the bed, for wood and stones, umavsekes, and there's still a gap. In other words, there's still a gap between what you stored underneath the bed and the top and the underneath the bed. Ain't sarach bedika, does not require searching. So the Gemara says, first of all, kasha mita the mita. This Bryce of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you do not have to search underneath the bed, and the Bryce beforehand said you do have to search underneath the bed. Kasha chayrin chayrin. The first Bryce said you go and you stick your hands in as far as they could go, and the other one does the same, and then you mavata beliba, you nullify in your heart. This one says you don't, what do you call it? I mean, that's what this one says. The first one said you don't have to do it. So the empty Gemara. Chayrin like kasha. The holes are not a problem. The first Bryce who said that the holes were very high or very low on the wall. So therefore the holes are not conducive for storage. Since they're not conducive for storage, we go on the logic that no, not a problem. What he called chametz on Mustam did not go into any of those holes. In the second Bryce, what happens is that during the second one, where the hole is in the middle of the wall, so it's in the perfect location to store things. And if you have to store it there, you got to check and stick your hand in all the way. Mita like kasha. Middalia. In the first paraisa, the legs of the bed were very high, so there was plenty of room. In the second bed, what we're saying is, even though it has legs, enough to storage things, But once you store things, there's very little gap between where the stuff being stored and the bottom of the bed. So it's once again not conducive to put chametz there. We don't have to search. So the Gemara says, but you and the Bride originally said the storehouse of wine I do not have to search. Sorry, but Tanya the storehouses of wine do need searching. The storehouses of oil do not need bedika. In other words, by wine, we said this before way back in the Mishnah. What are we worried about? That he supplies himself. That's what mistapek means. He supplies himself with wine. Meaning during the meal, he's going to send his waiter that has dirty chametz stika hands to go down to the basement to get more wine. So therefore, chametz stika hands touch the wine. So the Gemara, so then I should worry about oil too, that he's going to send the waiter down to the oil storage to get the oil. After the Gemara, and everybody sort of knows this. Shemen yesh kava l'achila. The amount of oil that's being used by a meal is set. It's like dips. You go ahead, it's a dip to shemen. So you bring it in the exact amount that you're going to use for the meal. Yayin ain't kava l'shia. But wine, there is no limit to how much you're going to drink. If you got a nice drinking crowd, it's a good kiddush after davening. The wine is going to get used up, and you're going to send the waiter to get more wine. Tanya Reb Chia, Osu Oitzus Seicha bebubble. Chazal treated the storehouses of beer in Babylonia to Oitzus Yayin be'Eretz Yisrael, like the storehouses of wine in Eretz Yisrael, b'mistapek, where people supplied themselves. In other words, beer was popular in Babel, and therefore people would store beer in their basements, and we have to worry about that chametz went down there because you ran down there to get beer during the meal. Amar Rav Chisda, Bei dogim ain't tzarich bedika. A fish pantry does not need bedika. V'atani tzricha bedika, but we learned in another price it does. Like kasha. Here we're dealing with the big fish, the large fish, the big carp, the big tuna that's cut up before the meal. Here we're dealing with the herring. Herring, hey, that you go back and forth. People want more herrings again. So with the big fish, it's taken care of before the meal. The little fish, the herrings, are being metapel, are being touched during the meal. We got to worry about them. A storehouse of salt and a storehouse of wax required searching. Salt is obvious. Today, of course, we all have salt, but as you all know, not that long ago, just think about Mahatma Gandhi and the salt march. That salt was one of the great commodities in the world because it was used, obviously, before refrigeration. So, in this case, salt is one of those things where you might keep going up and down during the meal to get. And the same thing with wax, because we have lights, thank God. But in those days, they lit the house with candles. If the meal slept, obviously you had to run downstairs to get more candles to light to keep the house lit. Amara Papa, Kitsive, Ube, Tamre, Tzarek Badika. A storehouse of wood and a storehouse of dates also requires searching. The wood, very simple, because you needed to heat up the house, right? So therefore, wood again would be used. Or for cooking, you would throw wood into the wood stove. So these kind of things that are used constantly running down even during the meal. And the same thing with dates, because dates we use for what's known as parparois, the dessert. So it's up to Gemara. Tana. The Tana of this price says we do not ask him, we do not obligate him to stick his hands into holes and cracks to search for chametz because of the danger. My sakana, what are we talking about? If you're worried about the danger because he might get bitten by a scorpion might be hiding in the hole. Then what in the world is he putting stuff in there in the first place? Why is he using it as a storage place? He should have been worried about the scorpion beforehand. Now he's getting orthodox. It's been to store things, you can store it. But when it comes to searching, I'm afraid of the scorpion. It doesn't work that way. So something about you're right. We're talking about a case where the wall collapsed. In other words, where the wall was standing, and people are always there. The scorpions are afraid, and they don't hide out in the thing, in the holes. But then the wall collapsed with the chametz in it, and now that it's collapsed, people aren't there around there. The scorpions are dancing around. So then if the wall collapsed, why are we even talking about searching? We have a rule. But Tanah, we learned chametz leaving that on top of it fell a rune, so that there's now it's buried underneath a rune. It's like it's already been disposed. It's automatically considered disposed, and I don't have to worry about it. The Gemara where we say it's automatically like it's been disposed. It's because a dog cannot go sniff and start digging after the leaven. It cannot. It doesn't bother with it. Over here is when the dog is sniffing around and starting to dig, which tells us that it's not really that buried that much. It's not buried that much. Now I got to worry about it. You got to search. But something more, you don't have to search, because the sakana of the scorpion is worse than the possibility of the chametz. We've got a rule. If I'm doing a mitzvah, the famous rule, shaluchei mitzvah einen nizakin, those who go to perform a mitzvah are not harmed. So if I'm engaging in the mitzvah of searching for chametz, I shouldn't have to worry about the scorpion. I've got providential protection. Maybe in that hole where you've been storing chametz, you also stored some household goods like needles. So you'll say, while I'm searching for chametz, I'll go search for my needles as well. Well, that's not the mitzvah. So then you're in trouble. But in doing it that way, when you're searching for chametz, you also search for your other stuff that you have in there. That's not a mitzvah. But Tanya, we learned, somebody says, Sela zu l'tzedakah, I'm going to give this Sela, this dollar for tzedakah, so that my son shall live. Or I'm giving this tzedakah, so that I should merit a portion in the world to come. The top of Chesamid Beis 80. He's considered a completely righteous person. So Dr. Gemara, Dilma Basa Debovik, meaning first he searches, no, he's a big tzaddik. He searches for the Vidika for the chametz. After he finishes searching, then he goes, you know what? I'm already here. Let's go search for all the other stuff that's fallen behind the couch. Now you're searching for stuff after the Vidika. You're no longer under protection. But the Gemara is going to give a much more basic answer in about 2 minutes. Dr. Gemara, Mishum sakanas hanochra, because of the dangers of the goyim, upalemayu, and it follows the opinion of palemo. It's not chur sheben Yehudi la Aramai, a hole that's between the house of a Jew and the house of a non-Jew. He searches as far as his hand goes. The rest he nullifies in his heart. Nope. He does not search this hole at all because of the danger involved. My sakana, what's the danger? Maybe the danger is witchcraft. That the guy next door is going to see the Jew poking his hand into a wall at night with a candle, and he's going to think there's some witchcraft going on over here, some voodoo going on over here, and he's going to report it to the authorities. But if that's the case, you're worried about that the guy's going to think you're involved in witchcraft. What in the world were you using this hole in the first place? Right? Don't even get into the hole. Why were you storing things in the first place? The Gemara says obvious. When does he put stuff into the wall? During the day and when there's natural light, so he can see what he's doing. So that's not going to bother the guy next door. He can say, oh, he's using it for storage. But now it's nighttime. He's poking around in the wall in the middle of the night with a candle, poking in. The guy is going to get freaked out of his mind. He's saying, oh, what's going on over there by the Jews? And it's going to occur to him that the Jews doing witchcraft on him. So they get it. So now the same question as before. Performing a mitzvah, you won't be harmed. And now we get to the Ikki Yisod. Where the harm is very likely, that's different. When we say shluchei mitzvah ein nizakin, somebody's going to perform a mitzvah, does not get harm, that's where the harm is unlikely. Nothing strange is going to happen. But when you can predict there's going to be harm, that's very likely. Shenema, because you can see. The case was like this. Hashem Yisbarach told Shmuel to go and anoint David and to make him David HaMelech, David the king. He told him to do this while Shaul HaMelech, Shaul the king, was still alive. Okay, so by Yomi Shmuel, so Shmuel says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eich Elech, but how could I go to anoint David? V'shama Shaul, Shaul is certain to find out, V'argoni, and he's going to kill me. By Yomi Hashem, Egla Boka Tichim Yidach. So Hashem said, take along your cap, hide what you're doing, no problem. Let's figure this out. Hashem tells Shmuel, go anoint David. So I mean, if it's Hashem's doing it, you should be able to rely on Hashem to protect you. But Shmuel says to Hashem, how can I do this? Shaul's going to find out and kill me. And Hashem says, you're right. Do it, like back in your head. Bring a cap, hide what you're doing. What's going on? The answer is, there's a natural way the world runs. The natural way the world runs is as well. Hashem press the button and put in the natural law. And the natural law is, if you're going to do something stupid is likely to happen. Right? Hashem is not getting involved. Even though his own commands. Even though his commands to Shmuel, go anoint David. But don't go and anoint him by announcing it everywhere on Twitter. Go ahead and do it quietly. So yesterday, I happened to have taken my father and my uncle to the cemetery because it was my grandfather's yard site. And I'm flying along at 85. My father tells me to slow down. And I tell him, Shliach mitzvah and nizakin. When you're going to perform a mitzvah, you don't get hurt. And my father turns around and tells me, hey, right? When the harm is likely, that's not a protection. Slow down. It literally happened yesterday. Exactly this Gemara that came alive. And they asked Rav, Hani b'nei bei Rav, those sons, it means the Bachrim that come to yeshiva, who live in the villages, in the plains. So what do we do about the fact that they come to yeshiva early in the morning when it's still dark, or go home after dark at night? Right? We've got a problem here. They're putting themselves into danger. Says Amalahu, Rav said, Nesnu alive al tabarai. Let it be on my account, and the responsibility rests on my neck. In other words, on my zechusim, I'm using my zechusim to protect them. So they said that's very fine when they're coming to yeshiva. But when they're going home from yeshiva, can they rely on you too? Amalei lo yadada. Rav says, I'm not sure about that. So, itma. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Shaluchei mitzvah ein nizakin. Those who are going to perform a mitzvah are not harmed. Loy b'lachilosan v'loy b'chatzirosan. Not on the way to do the mitzvah, and not on the return from doing the mitzvah. Command like who? Ki hai Tana detanya. Like this Tana that taught in the Baraisa. Isi ben Yehuda klape she'amra Torah, regarding what the Torah said. Lo yachmaid ish etzartzecha. In other words, the Torah says like this. We just talked about this yesterday, that everybody has to go up to Yerushalayim 3 times a year. Oila regolim. Have to go up for the regal for the holidays 3 times. Well, what happens if they go up? That means they're leaving their fields fallow. Nobody is living in their house. Nobody's collecting their mail. In other words, their possessions are vulnerable, right, to marauders. So the pasuk itself says, "Lo yachmait ishitzatzecha." No man will covet your land when you go up to appear before Hashem. You go 3 times a year. Hashem is saying, "No, I'm telling you now. I'm being made that when you do the mitzvah of coming to be oila regel, you will not. Your fields will not. Stuff will not happen to your possessions that are right now not being kept an eye on." In other words, malabi to teach. Your cows will graze in the meadow, and no animal, no wolf will come to devour it. Your hens will pick in the garbage heap, and no weasel will come out to harm it. And therefore, this is a kal v'chomer, a fortuity argument. Just like these animals, who their regular way is that we're always worried they're going to be harmed. that wolves are going to come out of the woods at any given time to damage them, or a weasel will come out of the garbage heap to harm your chickens. We say they said they will not be harmed. That human beings who do not have the tendency to be harmed by wild animals, etc., because they're human, Allah is kama b'kama, they would certainly be protected. So Zakti Gemara, so this tells me that I got proof they're protected when they go to a mitzvah. How do I know even when they come home? Talmud Leiber, because the Torah says regarding everybody who came to do the carbon Pesach, it says after you do the sacrificial Passover offering, Panisa Babaika, you will turn in the morning, and you'll go back to your tents. You will go back and you will find your tents all peaceful. Everything is in order, no problems. So now the Gemara asks a great question. Even once I have a second pasuk that tells us that you're protected even when you're going back from a mitzvah, then why did I need a pasuk to tell me when I'm going to a mitzvah I will be protected? If madach you're protected when you're going after the mitzvah, you're certainly protected when you go to the mitzvah. So I don't need a pasuk to tell me. So says the Gemara, because it's coming to teach us something from Rabami. To Amar Rabami, Kol Adam Sheyesh like Karka Oila L'Regel. Every man who owns land must go up for the pilgrimage, the 3 pilgrimages a year, the Shlosh Regalim. Ain't like Karka, somebody who does not own land, ain't Oila L'Regel, does not have to go up for the pilgrimage. And the reason for this is very simple. Person who owns land is the one that has to start the year by plowing and planting and weeding and doing all the work month after month so that the Tavua grows and things, which means that it can lend to the problem by him saying, Koichi b'yetzem yadi, all this came about through the use of my own hand, and forget that it is Hashem Yisbarach that makes the ground somehow allow the seeds to sprout, who sends the rain, etc., who gave you the power of knowledge and the hands and the feet to do what has to get done to do it. So that's why the landowner, they have to go up L'fnei Hashem to see the face of Hashem. A person who unfortunately does not have land and doesn't know where his food is coming from day to day, especially in an agrarian society, an agricultural society, always remembers the hand of Hashem that's always feeding him. And the truth is, if you notice that the 3 Yom Tovim, of course, are agricultural Yom Tovim. Pesach is B'chodesh Ha'aviv, at the day of the planting, those where you begin to plow. Shavuos is when things are coming, when it's beginning to grow, and Sukkot is when the harvest is over. And in fact, the Torah Kedosha refers to the Yom Tovim very much from their agricultural points of view. So besides the spiritual point of view, there's in essence, they are the agricultural cycle that we are celebrating. Zok to Gemara Vaita. We got another 5 minutes, and then we'll give it to you. I want to see if we can get to the bottom over here, so we're right at the tip of today's daf. How come the Paris of Ganisa do not grow in Jerusalem? These Paris, these produce were unbelievably sweet and yummy. So that the Oila Regalim, the pilgrims, shouldn't say, if we only came up just so that we could eat the produce of Ginomi that grow in Jerusalem, that would have been enough. Which means the Nimsa Lishma, they would have done the pilgrimage not for its own sake of seeing the face of Hashem, but for the beauty, the wonderful thing of having the foods that grow in Yerushalayim. Same idea. How come the hot springs are in Tiberia, not in Jerusalem? Today, so that the Oila Regalim, the pilgrims, shouldn't say, had we only ascended to bathe in the hot springs of Tiberia, for this reason it would be enough for us. It would then mean that they came up not with the right thought process inside their heads. They would have not said they're coming up to see Hashem, but to go bathe in the hot spring. Now the Gemara goes back to our regular Gemara, back to our regularly scheduled program. And where does it say? Now, if you remember that we searched 2 rows of a wine cellar. If you remember the Mishnah all the way at the beginning, it said Orla Abasa on the night of the 14th Baitkin as a chametz, we searched the chametz there. All places that chametz does not go into, ain't tzarich bedika, does not mean bedika. And then the Mishnah said, Ubameh Omrim, and when do we say Beis Shurish Meratev, that 2 rows of the wine cellar need to be searched? Where did this fall in? So right to Gemara, Meratev Manda Devar Shmei. Who mentioned the wine cellar? So Zakti Gemara, Hachi Kama. Any place in which chametz is not brought does not require searching. And storehouses of wine and storehouses of oil do not need searching. Now, the Mishnah then says, but then in that case, where do we say? We see Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel talk about that you do have to search 2 rows of wine of the wine cellar. It's in a place where you do bring chametz into the wine cellar. And where is that? Where a person supplies himself during the meals with his own wine from his own wine cellar. So Zakti Gemara, Beis Shammai suris that you have to do 2 rows over the entire surface. Rabbi Yehuda, what does Beis Shammai mean? Shtei suris shamru, the 2 rows that he said, mina aretz v'atshmei kaira, from the floor of the cellar all the way to the highest beam of the cellar, because they would pile up the barrels of wine one on top of each other from the floor to the ceiling. Rabbi Yochanan Amashura Achas Kimin Gamma. It means 1 row in the shape of a Greek letter gamma. So what it means like this? Yehuda is saying essentially, you have a row of wine barrels all the way going back. So Beis Shammai, according to Rabbi Yehuda, says you got to do the first row, the whole first row, and the whole second row. Rabbi Yochanan says no, like the Greek letter gamma, which is essentially a right angle, like this, exactly like this. So you do the first row vertically, and then when you hit the top of that first row, you then check the row horizontally, the top row. Because what Yochanan is simply saying, Beis Shammai, you first take out the wine barrels from the first row, and then when you get to the top, you're obviously going to start taking from the top of the other rows. So therefore, you check the first row, and then vertically, and then you check the next row horizontally on top, like a right angle. Tani Kabasa de Rabbi Yehuda, Tani Kabasa de Rabbi Yochanan. Tani Kabasa de Rabbi Yehuda, we learn like Rabbi Yehuda that it's the 2 rows, one like this and one like this on the side. The first row and the second row, what he calls Beis Shammai Yamim Shtei Shuris up and they call them Merate. Beis Shammai says 2 rows over the entire surface of the wine cellar. Shtei Shuris Shamru, the 2 rows that he's talking about, Min Haaretz Shmei Kaira, from the floor to the ceiling. So that's the first 2 rows, one behind the other. Tanya comes to Rabbi Yochanan like a gamma, like a right angle. Shtei Shuris up and they call them Merate. 2 rows over the entire surface of the wine cellar. What does that mean? The first row sees the opening, faces the doorway. And the second row is the one horizontally that's facing the ceiling. So we got the first row facing the door, and the second row, that's the top layer facing the ceiling. Okay, but the rows behind the outermost row, in other words, the rows all piled up behind it, and the rows beneath the upper top one, underneath the horizontal line, ain't tzarich bedika, does not need bedika. Just slightly further, Beis Hillel says the 2 outer rows, which are the most outer required. Amarav El Yoinish Shalamati Yemena. Rabbi Sil is talking about the utmost row and the one beneath it. So he says very simple, we're only dealing with the first row and we're only dealing with the top barrels on top and the row beneath it, because those are the wines you touch. When you have to get wine, you first take off the wine from the top, from the first row's top level, and then you take off the second level. Those 2 you have to search. No. El Yoinish Shemel Mena. Beis Hillel is talking about the 2 upper rows, meaning you have the first row, he takes off the first level on top, and then already he takes from the second level of the top level of the second row right behind. So if Beis Shammai says we're dealing in the first row vertically, the top 2 levels, Beis Hillel says no, we're dealing with horizontally the top two levels. My time of the Rav, why does Rav say that we're dealing vertically? Because he says the outer ones. So these two are facing the outer two rows. But it says the upper ones. It means since on the first row you're piled up 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. He's talking about only the first two levels on top, the bottom two levels that are also facing the door. You don't have to search, right? And Shmuel Amel we're dealing horizontally. The first row, upper level, and then the upper level of the second row. Hamai Tama, because it says the upper ones. It also says the outer ones. It means to exclude all the top rows of all the other rows that are behind them. We say the guy goes ahead and he takes the barrel from the top level of the first row. He takes the barrels from the top level of the second row, but that's far enough because he can't reach in further to get to the third row. It's already too far. From that point, he already has to take from the other road. Rav Chia Tani Kabasi the Rav. Rav Chia taught that they said that Basil is according to Rav. We're dealing with the two verticals. And most Tanoim learn like Shmuel. It's the two horizontal rows. And the halacha follows like Shmuel. However, the Rambam actually paskins like Rab, and Rabbeinu Hananel on the daf says because the rule is halacha karav isurin. The halacha is like Rab by isurin, by prohibitions, and the halacha is like Shmuel by mamanis. So here is an isurim because we're dealing with chametz, which is an isur. So we pass like Rab. The other Tanoim that pass like Shmuel say that's true. This is chametz, but the wine cellar is all about money. Since it's all about money, we pass like Shmuel. So we're now on the daf and daf test, and it's exactly 8:45.